Hello, everyone. Continuing with the series of Two at a Time, today I'm here to discuss topic 1 from section A and topic 5 from section B of the recently concluded Civil Services Examination Mains Essay Paper of 2025. Right? But before I go deeper into the discussion, I want to emphasize that every year you would observe that there are certain topics given in the essay paper which do not have the potential to be dealt or to be discussed from a multidimensional perspective. Sometimes it is very challenging, it is too difficult to write about the topic from different perspectives, go for different analysis, and even you find it very challenging to include diverse examples. So the idea is that yes, UPSC does give you choices in the essay paper, but not every essay topic should be chosen to write. Both these topics are limiting in nature. They are easy to understand either from literal or the metaphorical interpretation. But when you actually start writing, you would realize that while in the brainstorming stage itself, you are not able to generate wide perspectives. So it's advisable that students should not choose these topics. But yes, since we have decided to discuss each topic, we will be discussing both of these topics today. So let's start the discussion. Now, the first topic is from the section A, topic 1, which of course is truth knows no color, right? I hope you're able to see the board and you're able to hear my voice, okay? Yes. So, truth knows no color. And if you will understand, just a moment, I'll just adjust so that you're able to see this side of the board too. Yes. Right. So, truth knows no color. Now, we need to understand this topic, of course, is easy to understand, but it's so limiting in its approach that you won't find a lot of different ideas that you could write. Because, there's one easy method of decoding a topic is to break down the topic into parts and start, asking questions. But here, truth knows no color. You don't even have the possibility to generate a lot of different questions or arguments, right? So, yes, it is a nice topic, but might feel very challenging in the real exam. Truth knows no color. Let's understand what are the keywords. Of course, the keyword here is truth. It knows no color. Now, you need to understand that when it is being said knows no color, the color is the subjectivity, right? The color, in itself is a word which conveys that it's a spectrum. So spectrum is always subjective. Just like we say that gender, should be treated as a spectrum. Seriously, and in this way also, you have to understand that color is also being treated as a spectrum. So truth knows no color. That means you can't place truth over a spectrum. It's not subjective. Truth is objective, right? So that is one interpretation from the topic. Now, what are the themes or what are the keywords? Yes, truth knows no color. Theme is, of course, truth. You could also, sort of bring in the aspect of reality or another theme of reality towards it. Okay. And I also have clubbed this topic under the category of post-truth world. So whenever I have a topic which is, talking about post-truth, whenever a topic is talking about, social media bias, whenever a topic is talking about, you could say, propaganda, in the same category, I can put in this topic. Truth knows no color. Okay. Now let's move on to that what kind of arguments we can actually understand. Now, when I first look at the topic, my endeavor is always to force my mind that, okay, what ideas are coming into my mind? What different perspectives I can actually think of. So here, the first thing that I can understand is that truth knows no color. Yes, that means truth is absolute, truth is universal, and truth is impartial. Absolute, universal, impartial. Okay. Now, when I am just forcing myself to think further, I would also understand that it is not bound by constraints or ideologies. truth knows no color. Now, the background context is, of course, that it was set in the context of the, you could say, rights for Black people. In that time and era, it was assumed that if a truth is being spoken by a white man, it's actually a truth, but a fact or a thing said by the people of different race or ethnicity might not be considered as the ultimate truth. So they were fighting for the identity, they were fighting for the truth, and that's the background. So, yes, not bound by constraints or ideologies, not bound by race, caste, religion. So, truth for every person is same, right? Irrespective of gender, irrespective of caste, irrespective of race, right? Then we also need to understand that because the color word is mentioned, I have mentioned the spectrum. It's not a spectrum, it's black or white, it's yes or no. So truth is so objective that it doesn't find itself placed on a spectrum. It's not subjective, it is an objective thing. Either it's yes or no, and that's the truth, right? So this is what I have understood. Now, it also means that there is no scope of ambiguity. So doesn't know ambiguity, and there need not be any confusion. Truth knows no color. So it doesn't know, it doesn't lie on any spectrum. It is not having the possibility of any confusion, and it doesn't know ambiguity. Truth is truth. Okay. Now let's understand that what are the arguments that I could actually put in this particular essay. Yes, because here the key word is truth. I think logically generalizing, I would say that we can put the first argument as analyzing what is the word truth. What does truth mean for us? Okay. So, in a way, my first question is that what is truth? And not just asking truth, but I want to emphasize that Homo sapiens or the human civilization or humanity's various encounters with the understanding of truth, we have been a curious creature, right? So, over the period of time, over the entire civilizational history, Homo sapiens, human beings, have been struggling to understand what is truth and what is illusion, right? Even the religions, even the spiritual perspective, all are focusing on the same thing. So my question, my first argument is, what is truth, right? And human Homo sapiens, human civilizations encounter with truth. We are restless. We are curious in our search for truth. So I have tried to give you different ideas. I have tried to give, three perspectives, which is one from the ancient thinkers' perspective, the other is the religious, and of course the contemporary, or you could say the modern thinkers, right? So let's discuss each one by one. You don't have to elaborate all of this in a very detailed manner. You could pick, if you're writing this particular essay, I would say that when you're asking the question about what is truth, please pick up any one or two ideas from all this. My endeavor is to explain the topic in such a way that if you've got another essay topic with the theme of truth, you could use all these ideas, right? Okay. So ancient thinkers, we have, of course, the Western classical thinkers, what they've been saying. So Socrates have been saying that truth lay in questioning, dialogue, and self-examination, right? A very famous quote, which was also a UPSC previous year question: an unexamined life is not worth living. So when you're not examining your life, when you're not asking questions, that life is not worth living. And that's what Socrates had said. So truth lay in questioning, truth lay in debates, in dialogues, right? And in the process of self-examination. So for thinker Socrates, the truth was about questioning, dialogue, and self-examination. For Plato, another Western classical thinker, you must have heard of the allegory of cave, right? That in a cave, two, three men are sitting, and there's the shadow of the fire, and their perception, they are seeing the shadow of the outside world, which is falling inside the cave wall, and their perception is very limited. A man gets out of the cave, and his perception is then changed. Then he sees the reality of the world, and then he wants to come and inform his other cave mates, but they don't believe him. So allegory of cave, again, a very, very, you could say, very common example. You can also use it as introduction in other topics where you have perception, truth, the aspect of reality, right? So you can bring in that. So allegory, with the allegory of cave, Plato has talked about that truth is like sunlight and the philosopher must embrace and ascend to truth. So it's just like sunlight. When you actually, unless until you experience the sunlight, you will not understand that what is truth. Okay. So allegory of cave, in that allegory of cave, actually it was the fire, and the fire was just creating a shadow. It was creating a perception that was not the truth. Okay. So when you come out of the cave, that's where the sunlight lies, and that is where the truth lies. From the religious and spiritual perspective, of course, you can bring in ideas from religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, they have talked about the truth. So in Hinduism, you have the Satya, concept of Satya, right? That's the exact, you could say, Hindi name for truth. So Satya, it's the eternal and it is identical with Brahma, right? So beyond appearances and illusion. So Satya is, according to the Hinduism, according to the Upanishads, I would say, not just Hinduism, in the Upanishad text, it's talked about that the truth, the Satya is actually eternal and it's very much identical with Brahma. Brahma is Satya, okay? And it is something which is beyond the appearances and illusion, the concept of Maya, right? So Upanishads have talked about the Satya is, truth is beyond the illusions, beyond the deceptions, which is the Maya, and it is identical with Brahma. Then on the other side, you have Buddhism, you have the Four Noble Truths. All of these Four Noble Truths is talking about what? That Buddha realized that truth is seeing suffering as universal and then finding liberation. So Buddha realized that yes, every action, every aspect of human life has the component of suffering, has the component of dukkha, right? And that is suffering because of attachment to desires and all. So when you're finding liberation, that's where the ultimate truth comes in. So you have Four Noble Truths. You can again read about it. It's very detailed. I've just given you the idea over here. If you're not aware of the Four Noble Truths and how Buddhism is talking about the concept of Satya or truth, please read about it. It will also help you develop content for your another essay, right? Okay. Now, what are the modern thinkers talking about? So Kant or Friedrich Nietzsche, what they are talking about? Immanuel Kant is talking about that he has tried to distinguish that there are two things, phenomena and noumena. Okay. So phenomena is what we perceive, whatever we could understand, maybe what is our reality, whatever we could observe based on our senses and our perception power, that is phenomena. But then there exists a noumena, okay, and that is something which is beyond our perception, which exists, but maybe as humans with our limited perception we are not able to understand it, perceive it, realize it. So there exists phenomena, which is what appears to the person, to the individual, to the human being, and then you have noumena, which is the ultimate reality. And there is a great possibility that humans can never really understand what's the ultimate reality, because we have limited perception power, limited sensory, you could say, powers, right? So that is what is there. Then you have Friedrich Nietzsche, what they're talking about. So Friedrich Nietzsche is, talking, has given a very famous quote that there are no facts, only interpretations. So has, of course, you do understand that not many thinkers will directly be talking about every keyword. So, Friedrich Nietzsche has not directly talked about the truth concept, but yes, he has given a very famous quote, and he says what? That there are no facts, only interpretations. That means whatever you're understanding based on your interpretive power. Your understanding is again, based on your perception and sensory powers, sensory organs. So for humans, for individuals, there is nothing called as ultimate truth or ultimate fact. You are, how you're interpreting the fact is what is your understanding. So there are no facts, only interpretations, because you don't really know. Just like how we, sitting on the earth, see the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, but in actual reality, that's not what is happening, right? So there are no facts, only interpretations. You've got the perspective that whenever you're discussing, you can first pose the question that, okay, what is truth? And accordingly, you can take a few ideas from all these, philosophical, spiritual perspective and the modern thinker perspective, and you can discuss that, okay, what is the concept of truth? But do mention this, that human civilization or humanity has always been in the relentless search for truth. Okay, right. Now let's move on to the second argument, and this is what is my main argument, my core argument. If you have been following this two at a time series, you do understand that I always emphasize that there are certain arguments which are core arguments, which is exactly hitting the core demand of your essay topic, and then you have some peripheral arguments or some arguments which you use, which you write to set the context. So similarly, when I asked the first question, what is truth, that was my question, that was my argument to set the context, because truth is the most important keyword of my essay topic. But here, second argument is where my core idea, my core analysis will lie. So let's understand that what I'm going to discuss. So truth knows no color, that's my topic. So my second argument is that universality of truth, right? That means truth is absolute and impartial, and it knows no color, because through this argument I want to justify that it knows no color. Okay, so this is what is about. So unlike human prejudice, truth has no color, right? That means the humans are bounded with their perception, they are bounded in their rationality, they are bounded in their prejudices and biases that they have, opinions and all, but truth is way above it, right? It doesn't have any color, is not bounded by prejudices and the, you could say, constraints. It doesn't belong to anyone, and pursuit of truth dissolves false divisions. So over the period of time, we have seen that the sages, the saints, the monks, the people, who have sought to pursue truth, who have questioned themselves, they have ultimately realized that truth dissolves every kind of superficial division present in society. That's why all these saints and monks are way above gender, they are way above caste, they are way above race, right? They are way above, they are in sync with the nature, right? Because they even don't differentiate between animals, plants, and the humans. So the truth doesn't belong to anyone. And in the pursuit of truth, ultimately we realize that every false division, every false prejudice harbored by humans gets dissolved, right? Now, what examples could I put in when I'm analyzing this particular argument? Yes. So for the examples, yes, philosophy highlights truth as something which transcends the cultural and personal differences, right? Truth is a universal compass. It is everywhere same, right? So from philosophical perspective, you have truth which is transcending every kind of boundary, every kind of border, every kind of division that you have created, that humans have created. So it transcends cultural and personal differences. It is acting as a universal compass which is everywhere the same. What Aristotle has said, truth is correspondence between thought and reality. So for Aristotle, giving the philosophical perspective, he has talked about that truth is what? Truth is the correspondence between your thought and the reality. And from the human perspective, that is what truth is for us. Then if I bring in the aspect or example of scientific dimension, you have aspects of what? Scientific truths, laws of gravity, thermodynamic principles, you have even the DNA. So all these are universal truths. So the scientific principles, the scientific dimension has universal truths, has the component of universal truths, and it is valid everywhere. It doesn't matter which race, which caste, which gender, thinks about what. So every natural principle, every scientific principle is universal. Science shows truth as universal in law, but still evolving in human understanding. So science accepts that there are certain natural principles, natural laws, which are already operating, but because of our limited perception, our limited understanding, we are limited by our rationality, by our sensory organs, we sometimes are in the process of understanding that truth, that universal reality. So maybe many different natural principles, many different laws of science are existing, the world is functioning over it, but we are still unaware about it, right? So science is just about that. Yes, science shows that truth is universal in law, but the humans are still in the process of understanding it, and that is where the limitations of human intelligence is there. So when I'm talking about truth knows no color, I have to justify that truth is universal, it's absolute, it's impartial, It is beyond sometimes human understanding, and human are limited by their understanding because of the limited perception power. And that is why there are certain philosophies, there are certain scientific, you could say, principles which transcend the cultural bias, which transcend the personal boundaries, and there are certain laws, rules existing, which is the ultimate truth, but humans are still not able to understand it. Now let's move on to our next argument. So in a way, because yes, I did tell you that this topic is little bit tricky. You can't just keep on writing about truth knows no color, truth knows no color, from scientific perspective, from philosophy perspective, from economy perspective. No, you can't do that, because that's exactly not how you're supposed to write your essay in the recent times. So you have to develop different kind of peripheral arguments. Your third argument, this here, is the peripheral argument. So your first argument was just to set the context. Your second argument was actually the core argument, where you have to discuss it from philosophical perspective, that truth is universal, universal compass, it's absolute, it's impartial, it's transcending the cultural boundaries and all. Okay. And then third is where you talk about that the part of truth is riddled with challenges. So truth knows no color, that's right. But the human endeavor to understand truth is very, very difficult. That path towards truth, towards understanding, towards realization of truth, is riddled with challenges and lot of difficulties. We have seen that, and because you're discussing this here, this particular argument will give you the possibility to explore a lot of diverse examples. So path of truth is of course riddled with challenges, and pursuit of truth brings many enemies. Yes, when I'm talking about enemies, my focus is on both external and internal enemy. Okay, so for external, yes, I have given you a lot of examples. For Galileo, it was church. For Buddha, it was of course the general society, or you could say the Hindu priests, the Hindu saints and all. Darwin, of course, his evolution theory was termed as blasphemous, because he said he believed that we have naturally evolved, right, the entire evolution chain. But what does church or what does religion say? That God made us, Adam, Eve, and that concept. So Darwin's concept was in itself, his theory was blasphemous. It was against church at that point of time, when church was not accepting it. Then you have, of course, Rosa Parks' truth, right? Rosa Parks' truth of dignity, of human right, of equality, that was against the common societal system following in the USA at that point of time. So yes, when you're following the path of truth, it's very, very difficult. You are faced with external enemies. Then of course you have example of Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, right? So yes, their enemy, they're in the process of discovering the truth, revealing the truth, exposing the truth. They made enemies of different states, right? And by states I mean of course the countries, right? So Snowden and all, you have got the example. I've also added Mahatma Gandhi, because yes, if you're talking about truth, if you're talking about satyagraha, these kind of concepts, if you don't mention Mahatma Gandhi, of course it looks very incomplete. So yes, you also know the concept of Mahatma Gandhi's endeavor towards satyagraha and truth. Then you, in the path of, in the pursuit of truth, you have enemy which is internal. You also have to fight your own inner self to pursue, because it's not easy. So in a way, you're fighting your own shadows to realize the truth, to understand that okay, what's happening. So Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, has talked about this, that in the pursuit of truth, you have to fight your own shadows, right? And of course, the internal turmoil could also be towards your self identity, and especially from the perspective of LGBT people, LGBT sections, and of course homosexuality, and understanding that okay, what's your own self identity, irrespective of gender identification, also in itself, how you identify yourself, what's your purpose. So all that truth is also that you're trying to explore, you're trying to discover, and that is a turmoil, that is your enemy, that infighting is going on within yourself. So your enemy could be also internal, where you have to fight your own shadows. Okay, Carl Jung has said about this. Now we need to understand that why it's a challenge. I have given you the examples that okay, you have external enemies and you have to fight those enemies to realize and discover the truth. You have got the external enemies, you've got the internal enemies. But then why it is challenging? What is making this process challenging? Because whenever you're in the pursuit of truth, you will always face discomfort. It's never very comfortable, it's never cozy to be on the path of truth, right? So, with understanding of truth comes a lot of discomfort, it comes with a lot of internal strife, it comes with a lot of inconvenience, right? So, discomfort is where it makes it challenging. Then it also rattles the status quo. Whenever you're trying to pursue truth, whenever you're trying to understand what's real, what's reality, what's the ultimate truth, it's always going to rattle the status quo present in the society, wherever society, in whichever society you live, right? Wherever country you live. And it is also going to rattle the power structures, right? So you have all these, challenges. Then you also have that the pursuit of truth demands sacrifice, it demands isolation, it demands non-obedience. Our society, present society, the present structures, they expect obedience, they don't expect you to question. So when you're questioning, when you're on the path of truth, when you're trying to discover, realize what's the truth, it comes with a lot of non-obedience, and non-obedience is not a desirable quality in our society. So all of this makes it a challenging exercise. Okay, so when you're going on the path of truth, you're riddled with a lot of difficulties and challenges. You have to face a lot of enemies, your external internal enemies, and it's challenging because yes, you're rattling the status quo. Then in this context only, we have George Orwell's quote, "In times of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." And that is why, because it's a revolutionary act, it becomes a difficult exercise. It becomes a challenging exercise. Okay. Now we are going towards the counter argument. The counter argument here could be, or I would say not exactly counter argument, but just bringing a nuanced perspective, which is talking about truth in contemporary society. So postmodernism, post-truth world, how does truth actually is looking, for the human beings of 21st century? So you have postmodernism theory and you have post-truth world. So this talks about that truth might not be just, black or white, or it cannot be objective. You have an element of cultural relativism, or there's an element of relativity, right? So the concept of relativity will always talk about that the truth can vary. So the cultural relativism, my truth versus your truth, these conflicts can happen. So truth can vary, and thinkers like Foucault and Derrida has talked about that they have questioned truth because it is shaped by culture and power structures. So the postmodernist thinkers like Foucault and Derrida have talked about that our reality, our truth is being shaped by the present culture and the power structures. Whatever is the power structure present in your society, in your nearby, you could say, ambient environment, that is deciding what is your truth. So in a way, humans will never be able to realize what's the truth. Foucault has said what society calls truth is often product of dominant discourses maintained by power, right? We all know this, right? And I've given you the example of colonialism also, that the aspect of imperialism and colonialism was all there because the white man's burden, white man's supremacy, all that was, being projected that, okay, it is our duty to civilize the other people. And to civilize the other people, we are doing a lot of sacrifice, and we are, like, you were actually colonizing us, but then you were projecting that sort of idea that, yes, they are actually taking up, white man's burden. So colonialism, civilization, civilizing missions, and then even invasions in the recent, in the, last 20, 15 years, we have seen a lot of invasions happening over different countries, Iraq, Syria, and all that. And it is under the garb of what? It is in the context of what? That we are establishing democracy and human rights. Have the democracy been established? Have the human rights been established in those areas or countries? No. So in a way, these all things, that means truth is something which is, projected to us by the power structures, by the people who hold power. So Foucault has talked about this, that what society calls truth is often product of the dominant discourses, the dominant propaganda projected into the society is what is being projected as the truth for a lot of people, and we are not questioning it, right? Then Derrida, also another thinker, he also says that truth is slippery, it is very contextual. He says that, it's very, very difficult because the truth is slippery. Sometimes you don't understand that what's the objective part, what is the reality, and it's very difficult to understand, and it is very, very context based, just like the cultural relativism wala concept. So here again he's saying, Derrida is saying that it's contextual. So in the post truth world, the postmodernism, of course these are the ideas, but the post truth world, your truth versus my truth, or I would say in the post truth world, who is really worried about truth? Are we really worried about truth? No, we are just worried about what is that I want, and whatever is my goal, whatever is my aim. All truths will support it. So all whatever I want, the truth should be supporting it. If I want to be a successful person, my truth is success. Okay, so humans right now are not worried about that what is the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth. Your truth versus my truth is the common conflict. We are living in a world where emotions and personal beliefs and narratives matter more. So the post-truth world is a world where you have your narratives going on. We don't know what's the truth. We are so much caught up into the narrative. We are so much caught up into the propaganda that nobody can know that what's truly is the truth or the reality. So you have social media, the biased algorithms, that is of course creating an echo chamber, the propaganda machine at work. So all that is, the manifestation of the post-truth world. And presently, truth is contested and context dependent. So in a way, even people who are wise, they are very afraid of understanding that what is truth, because every truth can be contested. Every truth is debatable. Every truth can be questioned. And it is also very context dependent. You need to understand certain things only in the context in which it is presented. Out of the context, the meaning changes. So, because truth is impartial, it is not context based. But actually, in the present world, our truth has become very context based, right? So, that is what the post truth world is kind of a nuanced argument that you can put in this particular topic. To justify all of this, I have the quote: Churchill has said a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on, right? So you can use this quote whenever you want to emphasize that how lies and how deception or the negative things really have, they are at the speed of light, and the truth is just at the speed of sound. So competing against the speed of light, truth doesn't get the chance. So in a way, this is what the topic could be discussed from. Right now, coming to the aspect of introduction and conclusion. So let me first discuss the conclusion, because again, it will make more sense. So while interpretations differ, deeper realities remain universal anchors. So the humans should always remember that yes, because of our limited perception, it is very difficult to understand what is the ultimate truth. But we should always endeavor to understand truth from the basis of universal anchors. Universal anchors, like not just some universal scientific laws and principles, laws of gravity and all that, but also human rights, human dignity, you could say the union between Prakriti and Prakriti. So all that, can be, or the Purush and the Prakriti, right? So all that can be brought in. So while interpretations differ, deeper realities remain universal anchors. So scientific and the natural laws plus human dignity is what are the universal anchors for humans to follow. As Einstein has said, what we know is a drop, what we don't is an ocean. So even so, wise people like Albert Einstein has also talked about that what we know is just a drop in the ocean, and what we don't know is an entire ocean lying in front of us. So we are still not knowing what's the ultimate truth, what's the ultimate reality. It's very limited for us to understand. But what we can do is that we can anchor upon the universal laws, universal principles, which hold value irrespective of race, irrespective of the situation, irrespective of Than, Kal, Patra, right? This is the thing that you read in ethics, Than, Kal, Patra, which is the context, right? So it is independent of that. Possibility, and especially you have to consider that in the possibility of multiverses, possibility of parallel timelines, the search of truth can elude. us, right? So it can, create an illusion. So when we are also considering the possibility of multiple universes, multiple, universe, multiverses, parallel timelines, our truth is something which is beyond our comprehension. What is the actual truth will always be beyond the comprehension of normal common man or mortal human beings, right? So the mortal human beings will never be able to understand the aspect of truth. For humans, as Kant said, truth in matters of morality is the agreement of actions with universal law. So what you can actually follow is that for you, for an individual, the truth is that it, in the matters of morality, it should always be in the sync with the universal laws. That is where you can, bring your discussion, you can bring your these ideas to write as conclusion. Now, what can be written in the introduction? Because yes, the topic is something which is not very straightforward, it is not giving you a lot of possibility that okay, what can be written as introduction. So here I have tried to give you a contrast. Okay, you can always write your introduction by contrasting two different events, two different maybe thinkers or theories, two different personalities also, right? So the first event I have taken the inspiration from history. Homo sapiens have divided themselves in cultural differences, gender differences, race, caste, and ethnicity, right? So you can just mention that the entire world right now, from historical perspective, is divided by religions, is divided by racism, is divided by ethnicity, is even divided in the same house by gender. But the contemporary understanding, the contrasting event from the contemporary understanding is that through the Human Genome Project, we have understood what? That all humans share 99.9% of their DNA. So the so-called racial differences arise from tiny variations, which is even less than 0.1%. And which proves what? That yes, these are all created differences. So the truth is that humans are same, right? And whatever divisions we are harboring, it's a social construct. So for truth, for humans, the ultimate truth is that we all are Homo sapiens. We all share the same DNA. Whatever differences we have created is not natural, it's artificial, it's superimposed by the power structures present in society over a period of, a long time, like from the history. So over a period of centuries, we have been creating these social divisions, but the Human Genome Project has proved us wrong. Every human being on Earth shares identically 99.9% of their DNA with each other. So we are really same, right? And that is through that you can like contrast and bring the justification for the topic truth knows no color. Then of course, if you're finding it very difficult to this perspective, you can always start your essay with Socrates, Galileo, Mandela, their truth and their understanding and their fight towards truth, their fight towards human dignity, their fight towards equality. You can bring that kind of discussion because that is also very, very relevant for the topic truth knows no color. So yes, I hope even after discussing all of this, you are understanding the perspective that this topic is little limiting, it's little constructive, it's not really giving you that kind of possibility to explore a lot of different examples and ideas. And that is why I would recommend my students not to opt for such kind of topics. It's good to discuss such topics, but outside the examination hall. Try to steer away from such kind of topics because yes, it's unique, but you will really finding very challenging, you will really find it challenging to write it in the 1.5 hours time. Okay, now let's move on to our next topic, which is section B, topic number 5. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Now again, very interesting topic, but I'll tell you, this is it's very easy to talk about its counter argument. Like the counter argument for this topic, or the counter theme for this topic, is about taking action. And in a way, we have already a lot of times prepared the importance of taking action, right? We have different essay themes, different essay topics on the importance of being proactive, the importance of taking action, being responsible, right? So, but this topic is talking about the importance or significance of not taking action, leaving something as it is, which is, again, so the topic is very interesting. You're also able to understand what it's trying to say. But again, you will, find it very challenging when you're brainstorming. You'll not be able to write it from multiple perspectives. Even thinking about examples from different dimensions would be really, really difficult for you. So that is why, in the same way, I would say, like just like the topic one, topic number 5 in section B is also challenging as compared to the other topics. So again, I would say that ideally, I won't recommend my students to opt for this kind of topic in the exam. But yes, many students have written, like those who have written this year's mains exam, they have opted for this topic. Maybe they were feeling confident, they had ideas. So if you feel that yes, you have, good examples, you can break down the topic, you can decode the topic, you can bring in a lot of variety of arguments, you can of course go for it. It's all about confidence, it's all about individual preparation. But yes, as a general guidance, I would again say that this topic is again tricky to handle in the real exam. Okay, so muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. What are the important keywords and phrases? Yes, muddy water, cleared, leaving it alone. Yes, and these are the important phrases. Muddy water is, of course, it means that something which is filled with sediments, something which is not clear, the visibility is less, and leaving it alone, that means you're not disturbing it. What are the themes we can, categorize it under this topic? We can categorize it under the theme of patience, the importance of inaction, and solving issues of conflicts. So sometimes you can actually take whatever your understanding of this topic, and if you've got a topic of taking action, you can put it as a counter argument that solving issues of conflict sometimes, it's not recommended. You should leave it. So muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Now, this topic is very philosophical topic. This actual quote has been given by Alan Watts. Okay, so Alan Watts again is is a neo age thinker. I will not say thinker, but a philosopher. Okay, and spiritual philosopher for that matter. So he has given this concept. Okay, now let's understand that. Okay, when I read this topic for the first time, what ideas do I understand? What different perspectives I actually understand from the topic? What all is coming into my mind? So when I read the topic, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone, my first thought is that it's talking about that inaction is also significant. So inaction is significant too, or taking no action is also equally important. Then patience and restraint to let events unfold on its own. This topic is talking about patience, that sometimes whatever conflict or situations are there, you should leave it to get it resolved on its own. You should not interfere. So patience and restraint is another idea that is coming into my mind. Then, because the topic is saying that leave it alone, so action and interference can prolong confusion, right? So if you're interfering in something, if you're deliberately taking an action, and this action is actually not a well thought action, okay, so if you're taking an impulsive action, it can lead to confusion, it can lead to further more chaos. Action without wisdom can cloud reality, right? So if you're taking an action which is impulsive, which is without wisdom, without thoughtful, you could say, exercise, then yes, it can cloud the reality. And then of course, I am also understanding that it says muddy water. So from the reality perspective, like from the taking inspiration from the real life, nature has its own way of restoring balance, and in a way, muddy water, if left out in the nature, it will settle the sediments on its own and the water will become clear. So nature's role is also important, that sometimes nature has its own way of restoring balance and order, and it doesn't need human interference. You will understand later on that why I have picked up this idea, because through this I could justify a lot of nice examples for this topic. Okay, so now let's move on that. Okay, what are my arguments? My arguments are that the first thing, now here I'm taking a little, like a slightly different approach. So because my idea is that taking action is always has been the most important, you could say, idea, and it's always been emphasized as the most important thing, that you should be decisive, you should take action. I want to start my topic from the aspect of that how homo sapiens or humans have been trained, have been forced to take action, right? Because the entire, you could say, narrative is about importance of taking action. Time and tide waits for none. No time is waiting for you. So you need to be decisive. You need to take the, the benefit of the opportunity in front of you. So, or if you're not taking that action, then your opportunity is lost. So considering all that, my first argument is that we are taught to take action. Why? Because time and tide waits for none. Yes, it is going against my topic, but I'm just using this argument to set the context again. I'm not going to elaborate it further. I'm not going to deviate from my topic. I'm just going to use this concept that human beings have been taught to not wait. Human beings have been taught to take decisive action. Human beings have been taught to, give importance to time. So, in a way, yes, we are supposed to take action, and time and tide waits for none. So, civilizations plus the human understanding values decisive and timely action. And loss of time and loss of opportunity is a regretful thing in life. If you're losing out on opportunity, you tend to be so much regretful. Oh my God, what big mistake I did. So in a way, most of the times the common narrative throughout the human life cycle is about being decisive, taking the action, being proactive, right? And that's how we pressurize ourselves. Because even we have examples that the Roman Empire's decline was about, and it was because of due to delays in military action and political decisions. So Roman Empire also suffered its downfall, its decline, because they were not able to take timely action, they were not proactive political decisions, and there was no timely military action. With that, I will end this particular argument and discussion. Okay, I can bring in the quote of Shakespeare that, okay, Shakespeare has also said the importance of time because time and tide waits for none. So better 3 hours too soon than a minute too late, to highlight the importance of time, okay, and taking action at the proper time and opportunity. But then here comes in my second argument, is my core argument, because my topic says muddy water is best cleared when it is left alone, when it is, left. So some situations require patience, and this is where is my core argument, which will start. So some situations require patience. What are the different philosophies about patience? Because I have to justify the topic, so I need to bring in thinkers, I need to bring in philosophy who have highlighted the importance of patience, who have highlighted the importance of restraint, who have highlighted that sometimes inaction or thoughtful, well thought out action will actually give you better results. So the first philosophy is about Taoism. Okay, now Taoism philosophy, there's a concept of Wu Wei. Okay, and Wu Wei actually means non-action. So Taoism says that Wu Wei allows natural processes to restore balance. You should not deliberately interfere. You should be in an inactive state and let nature takes its own course. So Taoism is talking about this. Then you have another philosophy, which is the Zen or the meditation principles. Meditation principles, the Zen philosophy talks about stillness. It talks about the importance of appreciating patience. So it appreciates stillness. It focuses on that a restless mind cannot grasp for truth. So the Zen philosophy, the meditative principles, they talk about that you should be still so that you can develop focus, and a restless mind really cannot grasp the reality, the truth part of it. So you have to be very, very still, and that is why you find the monks, and the saints staying in meditative poses for, such a long period of time, because that's what they understand. So nature knows how to restore balance without interference. So till here, I was just trying to give you the philosophical idea that, okay, certain philosophies have appreciated the power of stillness, the power of focus, the power of inaction, and that's how it is projected. Then nature also, like this is again not philosophy but the reality part of it, that you observe from nature, that nature itself has given a lot of examples where non-interference, where balancing of the natural ecosystem has happened on its own. So nature also knows how to restore balance without interference. How? You have seen ecological succession. You have read about this concept of ecological succession, right? In the prelims time also, you understand that if there's a barren land, if there's a forest fire or there's a fire, jhum cultivation, and then it is left fallow, then automatically you have the ecological, succession happening over there, like the small, plants and all that, weeds and all that start growing on their own, and the entire area regains its stability, right? So ecological succession and the presence of biogeochemical cycles in the nature, it proves that external interference is not required. Some balance is itself restored over time, but you have to give it time, you have to be patient. So the presence of biogeochemical cycles, the presence of the concept of ecological succession, it tells us that nature has control, nature has its own method of restoring control, restoring the order, and there's no need of external interference, right? Then you also have the understanding that there are natural bioremediation filtering mechanisms, and this I got inspired from the word itself, muddy water. So you must have heard that rivers also have their natural, bioremediation properties. They have, filtering mechanisms. The sediments also get settled down over the period of time. So nature believes in restoring order and stability over period of time. It doesn't want to put in external interference, right? So nature has given us this concept, and to justify all of this, I have an example, which is the example of black fungus. So black fungus with the scientific name of Cladosporium spherospermum, okay? You can just write black fungus. Don't worry about the scientific terminology. I've just given you just to give you, sort of additional content. So black fungus, it has been observed that it is thriving in the highly radioactive environment of Chernobyl. So the Chernobyl, the nuclear disaster that happened in Russia, or erstwhile Russia. So Chernobyl has this, right now it has been observed that for the past few years, there is a black fungus growing and thriving, not just growing, thriving in that radiation filled environment. And how it was thriving, it was found out that it has melanin pigment, just like, our skin also has melanin. So it has melanin pigment, that black color pigment is there, which is actually helping it eat radiation. It is utilizing the radiation to convert it into chemical energy. So it has radiation eating abilities, this black fungus, and it has melanin pigment, which has the potential to convert gamma radiation into chemical energy. And that's how it is surviving in that toxic environment. So muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Even the disasters like of such, high intensity, of such, life threatening, the fungus is thriving over there. So sometimes if something wrong has happened, you need to give it time. It could be a possibility that nature or time itself will heal that particular thing which has, happened in a negative way. So this is a very nice example which you can use to emphasize that even in negative situations, you have something of positive. Nature gives you the possibility that you don't need to interfere, you need to leave that thing, and the nature itself might, have its own restorative properties. It will self heal itself, okay? So that is something that you can really use this as an example, a very unique, innovative example that could be brought in. Then if you want to bring in the human psychological perspective, that also is there, that muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. So when you're in extreme impulsive states of, maybe triggered by anger, grief, rage, vengeance, all those negative feelings are there, it's better that you give it time, because that can cloud judgment, and it's necessary for humans to reflect and to regulate their emotions. So if you're not regulating your emotion, if you're not giving your anger, you cannot never be angry. It cannot ever happen. No, as humans, we have all kind of range of emotions. If we feel joy, we also feel sad. If we feel happy, there's an anger, there's grief. So we are, made up of a lot of emotions. So you can't deny the emotions, but whenever you're feeling angry, when you're feeling, that kind of, you're feeling triggered, you're having that impulsive, emotions, it's better to give it time to settle it down. So learn to regulate, and that is what emotional intelligence is all about. So learn to regulate your emotions, learn to reflect on what triggered me, what happened, and how can I control it in the future. That is how you can control, and that is what anger management is also about. So from the human psychological perspective also, it is recommended that whenever you're getting triggered, whenever you're having such kind of negative emotions, it's better to give it time, because it will cloud your judgment. It's said na that don't make promises when you're happy, and don't decide something when you're angry, because both extreme happiness and extreme grief or anger can cloud your judgment, right? So when you're in a neutral state of mind, then only decide on something, right? Patience is bitter, but its fruits are sweet. So this is also something that you can bring in, that human psychological perspective, that when you're exercising patience, it is bitter, it's not easy to have patience, but its fruits are always sweet. The patience is always going to give you something which is always going to benefit you. Okay, so yes, you can, to justify this argument, you can bring in Mahatma Gandhi's example, that Gandhi often waited for the opportune time to act. He was never impulsive, and we have seen through all those NCM, like non-cooperation movement, and the examples of civil disobedience, that he was always he ensured that every movement happened at the most opportune time. He was not impulsive in launching those movements, in taking decisions, right? And for that also he was criticized, but in a way that was his approach towards life. So this is where you have to elaborate that, okay, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. So having patience, controlling your emotions, restrain and all that, because nature is also trying to create balance through leaving something out, and not externally interfering. Similarly, humans also need to learn and regulate their emotions and not be impulsive, not always try and interfere into certain things. But then what is the way out? The way out is that you have to understand that when should you act and when should you wait, how to decide that at which particular point of time you need to take an action, because yes, taking action is very important, and when to decide that you have to wait. So this is again a debate that will keep on happening in the minds of human. So when to act versus when to wait. So when you have clarity, when you have wisdom, when you have understanding, or when wisdom and understanding is needed, waiting is most beneficial. If you don't have all facts in hand, if the picture is not clear, if you don't know what is happening, your understanding is limited, your wisdom is limited about that particular aspect, then it's better to wait and watch. It's better to gain clarity and then take action. And when the situations are like that, that yes, you have to save somebody's life, or you have to take an action, you have to fight or flight kind of situation. Yes, there, of course, you have to be impulsive, you have to act. So impulsive interference would worsen the outcomes. That's what, and that is where you need to build in patience. Okay, so this is another argument that you can bring in, that when to act and versus when to wait. Now, for this topic, what could be the introduction, what could be the conclusion? So conclusion may, to again continue with the same perspective. Civilizations honor decisive leaders who act with urgency, yet they revere, they worship sages who wait patiently, dwelling in stillness. So over the period of time, you would see that different people need to have different characteristics. So political leaders, they are always appreciated if they are decisive, if they are firm, if they know what to do in situations of crisis. So civilizations or humanity appreciates such people, leaders who are decisive, who are able to take actions. But at the same time, we worship, we respect, we appreciate those sages, those saints, monks who sit in stillness, who sit in meditation, who show us that with patience, enlightenment can be gained. So we also appreciate that. So in a way, it's a balance, right? So civilizations honor decisive leaders, but we also worship sages who wait patiently, who dwell in stillness. So human wisdom should be able to differentiate the two, when to act and when to wait. And that is what is human life all about. So whatever is your understanding, whatever the wisdom, it says that different situations require different treatment. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. This philosophy can work in certain contexts, in certain limited ways, but in other places, you might have to take actions, you might have to be decisive, you have to be firm in your approach, right? But of course, don't act out of impulsive perspective or your impulsive nature, because if you're acting in haste, then you will repent at leisure. So don't do this, don't act out of haste. And Sun Tzu has said what? Because this is a quote, it's very relevant. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. So, as a human, you should always be knowing which battles need to be fought and which battles need to be ignored. Not every battle needs to be fight, right? Not to be fought with by the person. So you have to know that that person who knows when to take action, when to be patient, when to restrain oneself will be the winner. So Sun Tzu has also said a very relevant quote, and this is, equally relevant in many other different topics also. You can use this quote. Now, when we come to the introduction, I have got a very nice reference, a little uncommon. Like, I would not say the reference is uncommon, but the way you write it can become a little unconventional, which will impress the examiner. So I've taken the example of Mahabharat. Now, we need to understand that after the incident of Chidharan, after the derobing incident in the court of Kauravas, of Draupadi, there wasn't an immediate fight. There was a gap of 12, 13 years. Then Mahabharat war happened. So, and why it was like, because, after such humiliation at the hands of Kauravas, of Pandavas, and, Draupadi, it was very natural to think of taking revenge, to avenging Draupadi honor, right? And even from the Draupadi, perspective, she wanted to get justice. But they knew that impulsive decision is going to act against them. So they waited patiently. And meanwhile, during those years, so let me just read it and then you'll be able to understand the story very well. So Draupadi's humiliation in court didn't trigger instant war in spite of Pandava's rage and impulsion to take vengeance. The elders intervened. The elders here, of course, like Dhritarashtra, Bhishma Pitama, Vidur, they all intervened and they tried to control the situation. And even Draupadi demanded justice and not revenge. So time was allowed to pass. The muddy waters were, made to settle down. And in between these years, Krishna, Sri Krishna, Lord Krishna tried to meditate, not, no, sorry, mediate, right? Mediate. And when every path of diplomacy was exhausted, then they decided to go for the war of, dharma versus adharma. So impulsive decisions is usually discouraged. Wise people would never ask you to take impulsive actions, because anything which clouds your, anything which is impulsive, which is, triggered, can cloud your judgment. So a sufficient amount of time was given, and during that time, of course, people were not sitting idle. Sri Krishna was trying his best to see that what other alternative paths of mediation could be explored. But when all the things got exhausted, like in the sense that all other methods were not, fruitful, then only the decision to wage war was taken. So this is how you can justify the topic, that yes, the wisdom says to let the muddy waters settle down, but sometimes you have to take the action also. So that is how you can present your first introduction. The second introduction could be a very common example of Cuban Missile Crisis, that how, USA from, John Kennedy's perspective, JFK, and, from the Soviet Union also, both of them exercised restraint in spite of, being at the loggerheads, being the active participants in the Cold War. But they, of course, exercised restraint, and they avoided the Third World War or the nuclear crisis, right? So through the Cuban Missile Crisis also, you can start the introduction for this topic, that sometimes muddy water is best cleared when the conflicts are resolved on its own. You don't deliberately take some actions, and especially actions which are impulsive. You let the course of, events unfold on its own. You let time give you the wisdom that what is right. And in between, of course, you're not sitting idle, but you're taking those actions which is with well thought out methodology, which is, based out of wisdom. Okay, so with that, you can give your introduction for this particular topic. I hope you learned a lot. So with this, I end the series, in the sense that I end this part of the discussion. So we have covered all the 8 topics of the essay paper of Civil Services Mains Examination of 2025. You can watch the previous 3 parts. It's there on the YouTube channel. Then I'm going to, in the next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up topics from Civil Services Examination mains paper of 2024. Okay, so I'm going to proceed in this way because I believe that recent years are more important. It was important to discuss the current 2025 years paper so that you get a good idea that okay, what you can expect in the upcoming exams also in the next year's mains essay paper. And through this, my endeavor was to also give you content. My endeavor was to give you how to frame arguments and not just to use the basic pestle or SDG framework or ethical values framework, but explore the topic from multi-dimensional, from multiple, perspectives, so that you write an essay which is impressive and which can fetch a higher score. Okay, so I'll see you next week, and then we'll start the next series, the next part of discussing the 2024 essay paper. On that note, I wish you all the best. Hope you all are studying and take care of yourself. Bye bye.